I don't need to see myself. I need to see you. That. There was a. I believe there is a hide. Which is really weird. I can't believe there's no hide function here yet because I would prefer that so much more. That I don't use.
Distracting to stare at yourself while you're talking.
Well, yeah, I've gotten better at it, and I've realized like what I've done is I make the window small. So instead of being able to see you in full screen, and I got a 27-inch bloody monitor, and you're down to like 4 inches wide in the corner, and I almost can't see myself. So we're good that way. Okay, so at the end of the day, as I always say, as long as I get my 4, everything else is gravy. So the why did you get into automotive? What was your first year like? Yeah. What's your story thus far? And then your one piece of advice. And everything after that is golden and gravy. So
yeah. Good.
Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Do you have anything that you want me to check on?
No, I mean this is the first time I've done anything like this. So I've I'll probably mess it up more than you could possibly make any mistakes. So don't worry about that. So the editing room floor will be very full when you're done. So
don't worry about that because quite honestly, the best bits are the off the cuff. Like I said previously, I prefer unfiltered as much as humanly possible. We
have to filter pretty heavily on LinkedIn. Because you never know where your next job's going to be, or who your next boss, or who your next coworker, or something like that. So, in spite of how some of the posts come off, it's still very censored. I probably write and rewrite posts 6, 7, 8 times before I actually hit send on any of them.
I did that today. I rewrote something 7 times and then didn't post anything.
Yeah.
I was upset. It's like I should not LinkedIn when I'm upset. I should definitely not LinkedIn when I'm upset.
Yeah, and you will see people start to treat it like Facebook too, and rant a little or get a little too off. It's a business sharing site, right? It's not meant to be Facebook and although it gets used rampantly like Facebook, but
there's a line. I think somebody posted. I don't remember who it was. It was a large influencer and somebody that. It doesn't matter who it was. Anyway, the concept on LinkedIn, because it is so business focused, but people buy from people. There's a happy medium per se that you get enough personal where you learn who the person is, but not too much like it's Facebook. Something contextual every once in a while. It's like, hey, I actually live outside of the internet and I actually have a family and I do things that isn't work. I have goals and aspirations and things like that are outside of work. But at the same time, you still want to have, you almost want to bring a bit of context to work. It's like, why is this relevant? Why am I sharing this with you? Whatever the case may be, and so on and so forth. And I think that's important because people buy from people.
Yeah.
But you're right. The filtering on LinkedIn is a thing. Sometimes I'm not nearly as filtered as I probably should be. I'm definitely not filtered on here. I do filter when you've probably heard the car horn a couple of times when I put the clips out when I get rolling.
Right.
But I haven't mastered that beep yet on editing. There's definitely a fine art because it's hard because it's interesting because when you put them in, and I realize we're already off topic. When you do it, you actually have to mute or remove the sound completely that you want to overlay the horn to, or else you still hear it. So it's
with a horn making it worse.
It's exactly. The horn makes it worse. So interesting. So why don't we just jump in because I don't want to keep you too late because we had more difficulty technically with Riverside than we do normally. So Mr. Mike Baldwin.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you letting me come on and spend a little time with you.
I don't think there's a let. I think it was almost obligatory after the time that we've probably been following each other and commenting on each other, and I think we share a lot of common insight, common thought process, but there's a lot of stuff, obviously, that differ between where you come from, how you come from, what you've done in your career up to this point, and why you are where you are. But I think first, let's hear why. Why did you get into automotive?
Well, I got into automotive. I was kind of born into it. Some people are born into royalty, and I was born into quite the opposite. My grandparents had auto salvage business and used car lots dating back to the early 60s in California. And all my aunts, my uncles, my mom, everybody worked for the family business at one point or another in their life. And so from the time I was old enough to pick a tire up and roll it, I was there at these wrecking yards. We called them the wrecking yards. But and they moved from California to Las Vegas, and my dad and my mom kind of ran the business for a number of years. And so when I wasn't at school, I was there. When I was on the weekends, that's where I was. And, I mostly worked for candy and sodas from the convenience store. It wasn't really a job until, my teens, but that's when I learned how to do everything. I learned literally, my grandfather gave me a bucket of tools and he'd say, go get a carburetor off of a Chrysler LeBaron or something. And I didn't know what a carburetor, a Chrysler, or a LeBaron was. So I would just come back up and I would have a door handle and show it to him, and he'd go, what are you an idiot? That's not a carburetor. And over time, you start to pick this stuff up, and I was driving tow trucks when I was a little kid, and forklifts, and doing tires, and so it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to do something in this business.
That makes sense. That makes a lot. I remember those are the fondest memories, right? Those early memories, and I appreciate that so much, because my earliest memories of cars is with my grandfather, Big Red, and my grandfather, 3-year-old, standing on the bench seat driving the plow truck, this 2500 big block V8. And I remember, it's funny, you say carburetor like it's nothing, like, oh, I'll just send this 9-year-old out with a bunch of tools he has no idea how to use, to a car that he has never seen before, to remove components he's never seen or done or removed before. Yep. So I understand that, but that's awesome. Yeah, we've had a lot of guests on the show that there seems to be two. As we get on and we hear about stories of folks, there seems to be two different channels. It seems you're kind of born into it. You've got family who does it in some way, shape, or form, whether they sell cars, they fix cars, they're in service, or they sell product to dealerships, or whatever the case may be, or completely by accident. And it was, Sean Armour talks about, he was in the fashion industry. He going to fashion school, and his brother got him into the dealership because he had bills to pay, and because he was a young man at the time, need to pay bills. And Kaylee Filio was another one. She was working at, I believe she said she was working at a Subway, and the folks at Parts Edge came in on a regular basis, and obviously they saw something in her. Obviously we all see something in her now because she's amazing. But it was kind of by accident, and then you and we've literally been around it our entire lives, from an early age. So it's interesting how those two patterns are met. So when you grew and grew up and grew into your britches as you got older, what was the first job, and how did that first year go?
Yeah, so the first job came about after the business shut down. The business shut down in early 1993. My grandparents were too sick to run it, and the family members didn't want to deal with it. So they sold the business and told everybody to go get a new job. And so I had a friend who worked at a local Toyota dealership. He was a lot porter. And I said, man, you get to drive brand new cars every day? Like, that's what you do? He goes, oh, yeah, man, it's fun. It's great. And so I went down and applied. And they said, okay, well, if you don't hear from us in 30 days, you didn't get the job. And so I apply and I wait and I do odd jobs. I work construction, I work at a printing press. I bum around being a dumb kid for a while. And every 30 days, you couldn't apply more than once every 30 days. So I'd apply every month. And I did that for 4 months. And I never got called back. And this is before cell phones or anything like that. We had beepers, pagers or beepers. And so I'm out one day after the 4th or 5th time, and I get a call back, and the hiring agent says, "Hey, can you come in for an interview?" And I think I had just gotten off doing a construction job, so I'm in a tank top and cut off shorts, and it's Las Vegas in the summer, so it's, I'm sweaty and dirty. And I said, "Well, I can't right now. I'm not really ready." And she said, "Just come down anyway." And so I drove over there, and she hired me, and she was great. She was fantastic, and I was working. They said, "Well, you can be a porter. We have only at a body shop that we have, and you can start there on Monday." And so great, that's fantastic. And she gives me an address to the body shop, and the building wasn't even open. They were moving from one building to another, and she didn't know that. So I show up an hour early just in case, and I sit out front for 40 minutes, and there's nobody there. And I'm like, what's going on? And finally I drive to the other location, and the body shop manager said, "I don't know why they'd give you that. We're not over there yet." So I started that day, and
what a first day!
He'd take me in the back, and that's what he said. He goes, "Empty these trash cans and pick up the tape off the floor, and you go to lunch at 12." And that's how I started my day. And that was December of 1993 is when I walked into that place. Never really left the dealership since.
So you started in a body shop, and you started on a day, and you showed up to the wrong building, and it wasn't your fault they showed up to the wrong building. No. And then you started peeling tape, and now, can you explain to me? So this is I've heard this phrase before, and even though I was at a body shop for the time I was at the body shop, I never saw anybody put tape on the floor. It was I remember seeing this when they would wrap tires and they'd go around the bottoms and so on and so forth, but they never taped the floor. What does taping the floor mean?
Well, taping the floor was 100% due to how much of a slob the body guys were. They would just take their paper and their tape, and they would just throw it on the floor. And then you walk over it 3 or 4 times, and it becomes one with the floor. And then so you're over there with a razor scraping it up. And I'm talking, there's not a few pieces. There's thousands of pieces of tape that have been on the floor, because I don't know if it was part hazing that they're asking me to do it or what, but I'll just do it. And so, there was no tape on that floor by the end of the first week. I got all of it up, but and I wanted to, whatever they were doing, I wanted to kind of do that thing. Like if I saw the body guys, doing some task, I would wait till they left, and I would kind of go over there and, be nosy about it. And where the body shop was, right on the other side of the wall, was the mechanic shop. And so I used to just kind of watch through a window of the techs that were over there. Someday it was just, and I was 17 years old. I lied about my age to get this job. I told them that I had already turned 18, and I was still 9 months away from my 18th birthday. I was just a little kid, so.
Back in 93, when you could get away with that, and nobody once they figured it out, it was like, well, it's already here.
Yeah.
Let's keep them going.
Yeah.
Cool. So you now I understand the tape on the floor bit, because that brings a whole conversation that I now better understand from many years ago. Because the guys would tell the apprentices to pick the tape off the floor. Now I understand why.
Yeah, there was no strategy. Yeah, there was no strategy. It was just being slobs. But that first year was it was fun. Yeah, I mean, we got to do some really cool stuff. So at this time in 1993, Toyota had the Supra out, the 4th gen Supra. So I got to drive those all the time, because those were wrecked, and we would detail them and take them around. And Lexus was still pretty new, so we were seeing some of the early Lexus models come in, and so I got to drive a lot of cars. I got to see a lot of pro techs.
LS400. That was the first year of the LS400, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was like the first year of the LS400. There's a whole big, I didn't realize how important the LS400 was to the entire luxury sedan market.
Oh, it changed it completely.
It completely put everything on its head. So you literally Toyota Lexus in probably the most pivotal year of the two brands when it first started, like the 4th gen and the LS400 all at the same time in there. That's I'm jealous.
Okay, yeah, and I'm a broke kid driving a 71 Volkswagen Beetle, right? So these things are, even a Camry at the time was out of the, just over the top for me, and so it was neat to kind of be around that. And again, growing up in the wrecking yard, all those cars are old. They're all wrecked, they're all crashed, they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old at that time. So seeing a new car was unheard of to me. So having that, but that was that first year. The first year I focused on that. I had a lot of coworkers come and go, with me. I made friends with the body guys and the body shop mechanic. He was a old crusty mechanic, smoked a pack a day, and he'd sit over there and, work on cars and yell at everybody. But I just emulated him. Like, I just wanted to be as good of a mechanic as he was. So.
Even though he smoked a pack a day while on the shop floor, while he was actually wearing a piece of sandpaper in one hand and smoke in the other, and he still managed to turn way more hours than you could possibly imagine it.
Oh, these guys were 300-400 hours a month, guys. And
now contextually, that's a big. You can't contextually, right? For the automotive mechanics who have never been in a body shop before, it's a big difference between 300 to 400 a month in a body shop and 300 to 400 a month on a mechanic shop. Like it's not the same. So my I guess I would say my best thing is my opinion is that a target for an automotive shop, not a body shop, an automotive shop, a mechanic should be hitting roughly 115 to 120% productivity on their hours. More than that, in my opinion, means that they're missing steps that they should be doing, or they're not documenting, or they're not communicating properly for the rest of the team. Less than that, then they're missing opportunities to succeed. In a body shop, that number is closer to 150. Mm-hmm. So 145 to 150 body shop tech. We're not talking mechanical side, we're talking refinish side. 150 on the refinish side is a very good number to hit consistently. Mm-hmm. So when you're, 40 hours a week, that's 60 hours a week, that's 240 minimum. Those guys that have been sanding, refinishing for years and years and years, they'll be rolling 200, no problem. No problem.
Oh, yeah.
And the painters more so. Mm-hmm. So a good painter is, and you know this, after years, good painters they're probably more unicorn than that 25-year doctor of the house automotive mechanic. Yeah. Because an automotive painter that can paint at productivity also is saving you scads of money on materials. Yeah. Scads and scads and scads. I recall, we had transition in painters. I don't remember the reason why. We're going back several years now, but we had a transition in painters. And I remember looking at the balance sheet, so to speak, at the end of the month, and it was something like $25,000 less in materials in like a 30-day shift, $25,000 less, and we did the same number of cars. Yeah. Like it was stupid money. And that was, I think, after about 90 days, that new painter, we added like a full car, somewhere between a half car and a full car a day by the end of the 90 days. Like it was insane. Because he was just so capable of being able to see the whole picture, right? Yeah. The painters are really they really are, what's the word? Music, theater, lots of musicians, the conductor. They really are the conductor of a great shop. Like they can see, they can look at mechanical and see what's going on, pick apart. A good painter will be able to spot, hey, I know that is supposed to be a 5-day car. No. That's going to be a 3-car day. Let's do these, this, and like sprinkle fairy dust on it. And all of a sudden it becomes a 3-day car. We still get 5 days out of it. So money, and he throws it in, and now we got a happy customer and a very happy owner who likes the paycheck out of that particular car. So I digress out of that one a bit.
Well,
So
and I think that's why a lot of the painters and body guys didn't get along always well, right? Because they always called them the prima donnas, right? So I remember the body guys would eat lunch by themselves, and there was two painters at the shop. They would eat lunch by themselves. They would always go to lunch, and the body guys would sit over there and eat, you know, crusty sandwiches with their hands. These guys would go, to restaurants and like, those guys think they're better than us. So I was like, wow, they must be, they're like the kings of the shop. So, but
after a couple of body shops, that seems to, I don't know whether how wide this goes, and I hope anybody that's listening in Collision can give me some feedback on this. But in my experience, the guys and girls, because I've now met a couple of girls who do mechanical and refinish, so I'm getting a little bit more context. But the frame folks, the guys and girls who do pull frame, welding, and the painters, they're the prima donnas.
Yeah,
because somehow
they should be. That's the most tactile skill right there. So
right. But they're either they can do the job, or somehow they've got that magical fairy dust on them and they can figure out anything, and it's crazy. Yeah. And then you've got the standard, I won't say standard is standard folks in refinish do their job, but they all hang together. Like refinish, except for painters, refinish, it's like super click, right?
Yeah.
They stay together. That seems to be the common phrase. But the mechanical guys, the guys who are basically mechanics working in a body shop for the most part, take stuff apart, put stuff back together for the most part, they're happy guys.
Yeah.
Like it's let's how can we do this quickly? Okay, I gotta sort this, and there's usually the good ones are super organized, right? And that's where it relates to mechanical in our shop, where the really, really good ones are the ones that are super organized. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think, and it's weird because you don't know what starts it. Is it because they're organized that they're great, or they're better at the like a little more, diligent and focused, or is it the other way around? Are they good, and then as a byproduct they become, very organized in the way that they do their work? And I think Russell had a post a couple days ago about how you organize your nuts and bolts and stuff like that when you're taking something apart. And there was everything from throw them in one pile to individual little cubbies to, and I think it all depends on what you're doing, right? What kind of job, how intense it is, how much hardware there is. But I think everybody has some type of, whatever that chaotic mind may slow down for a moment. And if you have like a little bit of OCD like I did, and everything had to go in its place, or if you're just a guy who throws the bolts in the air and lets them land wherever, and then goes to the hardware bin and just takes new ones out, does it. But
I think I've done all of the above.
Yeah, in one day I've been all of them.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think my last couple of large jobs. So my last major job, which was mind-blowing because I had to put together, so we had like a 2010 Polaris ATV. I can't remember, it was like the camo something. I can't remember. It was older, 12 years old. So it had been taken apart, if I recall, during COVID by a mechanic, and they had sent it out because they were going to do it was teaching this young individual how to work on it and get them trained up because they were going to try and be a mechanic. But they took it all apart. And then COVID happened, and then they couldn't work on anything because this person couldn't come in. And then they left. So it was apart. So it was literally 2 cardboard boxes full of bolts and a machine where all of the plastic paneling was off, and the engine was out, the transmission was out, the diff was out, the wheels were off. That kind of stuff. So, and at that stage, this was early on, me starting where I am. I had never done that much work on an ATV, ever. Ever.
Yeah.
I'd never taken panels. At that stage, I still hadn't taken panels off an ATV yet. So I have no idea how this stuff works, how this stuff goes back together, what kind of order goes in. It's like, pull the service manual and have at it.
Yeah.
So I had at it. And I've done that before. Now, The only time I've ever done that to myself on purpose is like 25 years ago, when I had my first Neon. I pulled Neon apart. I just started putting bolts in buckets because I knew where stuff went. But when you have transmission out and apart, engine out and apart, front end out and apart, K-frame off, rear, like you have everything, like doors off. So you literally have body, you have electrical, you have chassis, you have suspension, you have driveline. Everything's in a. I've done it.
Yeah.
It sucked, but now I'm much more organized. The easy thing is Ziploc bags. Does anybody in your shop use that?
Yeah, I've seen it and I've done it, and I see it. A lot of guys in my shop now, they use these plastic bins with 20 or 30 different little holders in them. They all have those. They usually just throw them all in there, and they have their own little routine, on it. So, I mean, I've seen plastic bags individually labeled, and I've bought vehicles like that. We had a head gasket campaign in the 90s and early 2000s on the 3.0 V6s on the Toyota trucks, and we'd get them towed in from independent shops, from the people's backyards, and they would just be coffee cans full of nuts and bolts, and just part of the engine, and they go, I want my free head gaskets, and so we'd have to put them back together the best we could, and there'd be a lot of new bolts and old bolts and bolts that you had. Every mechanic on the planet has a drawer full of hardware, right, of stuff that didn't make it back on or whatever, right? You just get extras. You just end up with them, and so you just go in your nut and bolt bin and put it back together. So, but being organized, it will save you seconds and minutes and hours, on your day and on your life over the course of your career. So it pays off.
That's a big one that not everybody truly understands and comprehends and utilizes. And this is a big tip for mechanics who don't think about this on a day-to-day basis. Every 4 steps is 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. So every time you walk to your toolbox, if it's 4 steps, it's 4 steps there, 4 steps back. That's 10 seconds every single time. Plus the thought time that is required once you get to the toolbox, because you may or may not know exactly what you're doing, like meaning what tool you're going to pick up. You may or may not be looking at the service manual. You may or may not be writing something down. You may or may not be doing something. So you're going from you're adding 10 seconds to 30 seconds every single time you go to your toolbox. So for the folks that are listening and thinking about, okay, how do I go to the next level? Think about your steps. And I realize this is minutia here, but when you get to a level where you're starting to hit 100% and you're trying to get, okay, my next bonus tier is 112, right? Somehow let's say next bonus tier is 112 and that's an extra $1,000 a month or something like that, plus whatever hours you actually generate on there. Let's say those are the things that you need to look at. How many times are you walking to your toolbox per job? That's an easy number to calculate because you don't necessarily have to write anything down. That's where the whiteboard that I keep talking about in Coach's Corner comes out. That's where the journal keeps coming out. So at the end of the job, your whiteboard will say, every time you walk to your toolbox, put a mark on the whiteboard. When you're done the job, write down how many counters are on the whiteboard in your journal. 15. Well, you can calculate that out. Every 10 seconds, every mark is 10 seconds. 15 seconds, it's 150 seconds. So you can calculate how many minutes that is per job, per day, over a week. And it adds up large. I had a session with a technician about 4 months ago or 5 months ago. He was doing, I think we looked at it somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 times a day. Like that is not a small number per day, and it adds up. Right. So even if you chop it in half by thinking about, okay, if I'm going to my toolbox for this, if I'm going to for a 17, because I think the next whatever I got to take out is a 17 mil. Take the 17, take the 16, take the 18. Yes, it's a handful, but now you know 100% sure that you have the socket in your hand that you need for that next bolt. Unless you've done it 10 times, you know it's a 17. It's a 17 shallow half inch. So go from there. But those are little things that help you along the way, at least to get to that rollover point where it's about 6 to 10 jobs You've done the same car, same model, same job 6 to 10 times. You already know what socket or what wrench or what tool you got to use. That becomes moot. But we were trying to get him down at least to half his number per day. And half his number per day added up to 5 hours a week. Like we changed nothing else. We changed nothing else. Counter, journal, steps. End of chat.
Well, let's add another wrinkle to it now that didn't exist, when I was in the shop, much, in the beginning, especially at the end it was. But so, most techs will keep their phone on their toolbox, right on the top of the box or whatever. And so they'll be working on the car and then they go, oh, I need a tool. And they'll walk over to the toolbox and open a drawer and get the tool. And then they go, oh, I got an Instagram post, right? So they'll stop and they'll open the phone and look at that. Or something on TikTok or whatever. Oh, and then they'll start watching it, right? And and the next thing you know, they're just standing there scrolling, and then they put it down, and that was that one step, which would have been 20 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever your math came to. Now that's a 5.5 minute, maybe 10 minute, and then they're like, oh, I might as well go to the restroom, and take my phone with me and go up there, and so then it sidebars them from what they were doing, and another thing I don't understand and I was, when I first started, is when carts came out. And I think Mac was the first tool company to kind of come out with a cart. And it was just a tall plastic cart, polycarbonate or whatever, no drawers on it. But guys started putting tools on those. And what we would do, we would take a timing belt and screw one side to the cart and then kind of loop it and make little half moons on there. Mm-hmm. And it was big enough to put tools in. You could put air tools in there, or you could put wrenches or, whatever. And so you would start attaching tools to your cart when you didn't have a drawer. And then you would take the air chucks that you had and you would screw those in and you would set all your air tools on that. So you would take your tools with you, right? You were working on the back of the car doing a wheel bearing. You moved all your tools over there. So you weren't walking back and forth to your cart. And so we would set our carts up. We called them Cartzillas because they would have pretty much 90% of the tools you would use every day on your cart. And that cart went with you when you went to the alignment rack, you went to the tire machine, you went to the press, you went to another stall where it was open while you were doing something. So you didn't go back into your box. There was years and years where I probably didn't open 3, 4, 5 drawers out of my box ever because I didn't need anything out of there. It was all on my cart. And so that kept me from going back to my box, from walking back and forth. Every once in a while you need something. But so, we have guys in my shop that have carts, but the cart just sits on the wall next to their toolbox, right, to hold more stuff. And I go, why don't you wheel this over?
I've seen it. You get some of them. I've now a couple of past shops and a couple of shops I've walked through in the last couple of years. I've seen several of those carts. They have become inexpensive storage units for the multitude of the orange, red, black cases for stuff that you almost never use. So, maybe you're in a shop that has no need for vacuum pumps anymore. So you've got all of your squeeze vacuum pumps and you've got, the random coolant service tools that you'll probably never use again because the shop probably has a shop vacuum on a dolly cart that you can hook up and things of that nature that are on it. I've seen it. But if you're walking back and forth all the time and you don't have a cart, maybe it's time to invest in a cart.
They're $150 at Harbor Freight. They're $150 for a cart at Harbor Freight. You can't.
Right. You get the adjustable height ones. You don't need the $1,000 cart. You don't need the $500 cart. You need the cart that is enough for just the things that you're tidbitty working on now, so that if you happen to be working on a locking cylinder, you can lift the bloody table up almost to nipple height, so you can work real close with your fingers. And if anything drops, it's on that nice plush, that carpety thing on top. It's got room for a couple of pry bars, a couple of wrenches, or a couple of screwdrivers, whatever. But that's it. Anything more than that, and then you get overwhelmed with shit in the cart. Like just overwhelmed with stuff in the cart, and I'm guilty of that too, and I'm guilty of the phone still. I hammer out, and you and I both know that I try to hammer out notification stuff as much as humanly possible. I've gotten better at using on your phone. You can use Do Not Disturb. You can use Focus. You put the bloody thing to sleep. At least then you won't see the notifications unless you pick up your phone. And if you understand, you can build the habit of, okay, my phone is face down. it's on sleep. It's between 9 and 12. If my wife needs to call me and I don't hear my phone ring, she can still call the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically speaking, if the school needs to call me, my wife needs to call me. Beyond that, I really don't care who calls me between 9 and 4, approximately. So, good.
Well, I think these things it becomes a habit that you need to do, or and you need to have discipline if you are a tech that is consistently struggling making hours, struggling hitting production. Like if what they'll do is they'll kind of knee jerk go back to, well, I don't get good tickets. I do all of the crowd, I do all the oil changes, and he's doing all the brake jobs. But it's very simple. And I am telling you, hand to God, I'm telling you, I spent a lot of years. And Russell I keep referring to Russell, but I admire the way he communicates very well. But it's mind your own bay, right? And I spent so many years in everybody else's bay. I would watch guys, and they knew how to trigger me, right? We used to get a major service used to be a big thing. Now they're not a big thing anymore, but they used to be a 6-7 hour ticket for a major service, right? You might get plugs and a coolant service and brake adjustment, all this stuff. And we had these pink sheets, pink inspection sheets that went along with them. And so we would have guys walk out of dispatch with an oil change or a tire, and they would grab a pink sheet and put it on the back of their RO, and I would see it like a bull looking at a red flag. I would just go white, and I would come unglued, and I would lose it. And then they come out of parts, and they had an air filter or wiper blades or something, right? So they did it, and it would get me riled up, and I might have a 7 or 8 hour ticket in my own stall, but I'm busy watching what this guy's doing, right? And so it's been decades.
But I think there's something to learn from there too. There's something to learn from there. One is reiterating Russell's phrase there is legendary because it is perfect. It is simple. It's mind your own bay. Like It is one of the most powerful and impactful things that anyone who is in any kind of negative leaning headspace. Like that's first. The flip side of that is technicians who may genuinely not be getting the mix that is fair. So this is where, you work your DMS. As a service leader, you work your DMS because you have to populate basically their training. Okay, what are they capable of doing? Set the DMS up so that they can get the jobs they're qualified for. The second one is, as a service leader, you need to make sure that you're watching the mix as much as you are capable of watching the mix, so that an individual who gets 3 recalls in a row at 0.2 apiece that he's probably going to spend 0.4 to an hour on every single time doesn't immediately get a 0.2, 0.3 oil change on a 5,000 kilometer oil change. He needs to get some gravy. Because if by number 5, they haven't gotten something that gets them back into the positive headspace, you basically write the day off, right? You know this as well as I do. If they get bad, and it's the 80-20 rule. If I get 4 bads in a row, even if they pay me hours, so a shitty control arm job, which they might break even on, maybe they might break even on, that they don't want to do because they're not a front end person. They want to do the transmission diagnosis, or they want to do front end, or whatever the case. They don't, whatever. My point is, if the 5th job after 4 shit isn't good, the day's gone. If that happens every day, the week's gone. If that continues to happen without monitoring at a service leader level, you're going to lose a technician because it becomes a consistent thing. You got a grumpy, grouchy, not making any money tech. And if you look at solely the hours, they're like, well, why, 70% on this month? Like, you got 160 hours that you're here a month. Why am I only getting 120? Like, what can I do to help? Well, I'm getting nothing but shit jobs. And that snowballs into that immediate mentality of, well, they're complaining and they're not putting the work. Maybe they are on the phone. But if the mix isn't right, and this is where the ball is in leadership's court. This is where it sounds like you're doing that in your shop. You're making sure that as best as you possibly can, that the tickets are set up to go to the people who are capable of doing it, and that you are monitoring that they are actually getting a fair mix. And if they're not getting a fair mix or they're doing shit, you're looking, it's like, hey, let's have a look. You know, maybe you need training. Maybe you need to put your phone down. Maybe I need to review how the DMS is set up for you. But let's talk about it. Right? That's that high value leader stuff. So cool. So we got a little bit in the weeds there. That's awesome. We got a little bit in the weeds. So I know where we are. So last where we left off on the actual point here is you spent your first year in '93 at Toyota Lexus. It's like that's a while ago. I'm not going to say how long ago because I don't want to feel old and I don't want to make you feel old. But there's a lot of time that's been passed between then and now. What's happened since then?
Man, what's happened since then? You know, I've always when I started, when I was in the body shop, I used to see every Friday, and this is Las Vegas, so every Friday, all the techs, and I'm talking from the lube techs all the way up to the masters, they would go to the lake, almost all of them, during the summer. And so on Fridays, everybody would bring their boat, Lake Mead in Las Vegas.
Lake Mead, okay. I'm
so they would. Oh yeah, so they would bring boats, jet skis, you know, and they'd park them in the parking lot. And these guys all had like cool, like hot rod trucks, lowered Chevy trucks, Toyota pickups, and they'd have some jet skis on the back or boats or whatever. And I would just sit, I'd walk around, I'd, you know, come in the morning and I'd see them. I'm like, man, I want a boat, you know, I want a jet ski, and what do I got to do to get that job? And so I'd go to the service manager and I started asking, hey, can I, you know, be a lube tech? And at the time they had 3 of them, and those guys had been there like 5-6 years. Like they didn't want to move up. They were making, and this is '93, they were making 30-40 grand a year changing oil. And so I'm like, that's the job I want, you know? And so I asked every day for, you know, 8-9 months. I'd go over there and ask them, can I start? Can I get up? Can I get in? And I always was kind of nosy. I wanted to know what they did, right? I wanted to know what that job was. And I'd come in on my days off and I'd stand in there and talk to them and hang out, just try to be friends, you know, to try to make a way in. And so, you know, once I got that, you know, I got told on a Friday afternoon by my boss, hey, Monday you're going over to the main shop and you're going to be a lube tech. And so I went to Walmart and Sears and bought a Craftsman little toolbox, little red toolbox, and a 200-piece toolkit, and wheeled that in on Monday morning. And so, you know, after doing that, I would watch the techs across the shop. What are those masters doing? How did they get there? And I was just nosy, and I'd watch the shop foreman and I'd watch the service manager. And I was lucky at the time. I didn't understand it. I didn't recognize the teachings that I was getting from these older techs, these shop foremen, and these service managers. I thought they were a bit disconnected. I thought they were mean or whatever, you know. And so I wasn't taking some of the lessons well. I was bucking back against them, and I was a hard head. I was an a-hole as growing up, you know. And so I wouldn't listen, and I wouldn't take, you know, directions good. I thought I knew everything, and so, but I was nosy. I wanted to know how they got in those roles. Like, what's the next step? And I would get some, you know, every once in a while somebody would get to me. They're like, you know, don't think you're going to go from this lube tech stall to the service manager, right? Like, that's not how it works. You're going to have to go through all these steps. And okay, what do I need to do that? And I would just constantly ask and try to get a little better and a little faster. And you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so I was constantly asking for more to do. And sometimes, much to my own detriment, you know, I would get a position or I'd get an opportunity that was a little more than I could chew. And I'd struggle at it, you know, and, you know, kind of fake it till I make it. And then, you know, over time,
that struggle is required. Personal opinion, that struggle is required because those who struggle but continue and finish will far succeed anyone who doesn't struggle at all. Personal opinion over time. Because those who don't struggle don't understand what the challenge really means. when they get to something that's hard, they throw up their hands, and they have no way, there's no light at the end of the tunnel of that challenge for them. Those who struggle early and struggle often, the stuff later that's hard is easy to them, and then they find the really, really hard stuff. And as the phrase goes, the bigger the problem you solve, the more money you make. Yeah. Right? In HD, it's the bigger the iron, the bigger the chip, bigger the pay. Right? The concept is the same. The harder it is, the more you make. And for those listening who want to make more money, solve worse problems, solve harder problems, solve more challenging problems. You want to make more money in this industry. You got 5 years under your belt and you haven't done any EV training, get your EV training. You want to know what's coming next? Read the news. Right? Yeah. A month ago, Toyota posted that they are slowing down their EVs the way they're currently going so that they can focus and put more money back into hydrogen. Yeah. Right? That's public knowledge now that hydrogen is not just a conversation that's being had. It's kind of the conversation that Toyota is having right now. And when like the third largest manufacturer of automobiles on the planet, basically, I think third is the right number, but when they are talking about a shift from what we've been talking about for the last 10 years, what have been a very big conversation for the last 3 or 4 years, to something slightly different into hydrogen, that is something to think about. You want to make a lot of money? Be the first person who's licensed, insured, certified, and ready to repair hydrogen fuel cells en masse. Yeah. You want to be the person making a large paycheck? Be the field tech that the IT tech at the end of the phone call when they can't figure it out. Right. That's how you do that. And realistically speaking, you were doing that up until this point. You were asking, okay, how do I solve the next challenge? Well, the next challenge comes with a next paycheck, but the next challenge also, I need to learn this, and this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as techs, and 1 second, I'm going to shut this door real quick, but I'm sorry. So as techs, you get this. Sorry, my family came home and they're going to come in here
No, that's awesome. There is only one other person. There is only one other person who has left the frame, and there is only one other person, and he knows exactly who it is. He knows exactly who it is, and I'm going to rib him for it. But that's all right. It's all good. We love it.
But as a tech, you're constantly, I guess one of the big, skill sets that a tech has is problem solving, right? And so, is trying to find find the problem and then find the root cause and how you can make it better or you can fix it. So, I guess selfishly, I kept looking at these other roles saying, I don't like how he does that job. Like I would look at a shop. I had a shop foreman that I followed pretty much my whole career. He's still my mentor to this day. I called him just a week and a half ago, completely broken about, something that I'm going through right now at work. And so I had to talk to him, and he hasn't been my boss since 2011, but I still take what he says, as gospel because he's been through a lot. He's taught me a lot. So, but I've had other, service leadership and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't like how they do that. Why do they lead like that? Doesn't seem like that's getting us to do what he wants, and I've had people lead through, you can lead through compliance or you can lead through commitment. Right. And so if you get people to be compliant, you can use that too. I stole it from someone. So if you get people to just be compliant, then they'll stay in line. They'll do just enough to not get fired and not get in trouble. And if you get people to be committed to you, which is what I am to this guy that I used to work for, we would follow him through fire. We told him, if you went to work at the hamburger stand tomorrow, we would flip burgers with you. Like I would change careers to follow what he did, because I trusted that he always had our back. So I always thought, man, why can't you just be like that? And what does it take to get people to be committed to you? And they'll follow you through the fire, right? And I've found since getting into some service leadership positions, it's not what I thought it was. It's not as easy, and it doesn't just come as naturally for people to want to follow you, to want to trust you, especially if you come in an established place, right? If I'd have been a tech at a shop and then moved up through the role, that's a different feel. But when you come in as an outsider and you're trying to kind of win the hearts and minds of guys, you're trying to, undo maybe hurts that they've had from other service leadership and they're distrustful and stuff like that. That takes a while, and that can be tough, and that can be frustrating when you're like, guys, I'm really trying to do the right thing, and I don't want to tell you that I'm trying to do the right thing. I want to show you, but you're not seeing it. And so you get some frustrations, thinking that, why don't you just see what we're trying to do here? And it's tough. And it's
how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah, right.
You're talking, speaking my language here, because you're a couple of things. One, we talk about foremen and how important they are. I've talked about this in previous episodes, where how invaluable my first shop foreman was, and how much he shaped how my career in automotive has gone. And to this day, 20 plus years on, I still think about him almost every day when I am talking to technicians, when I'm talking about automotive. Anytime leadership comes up, he comes to mind. It's like, what would Rob do? What would Rob do? Every single time. And I've talked about this in the past as well, as how important, we talk about leadership, and we talk about the importance of leadership and having a high value leader. Unfortunately, I think shop foreman is kind of starting to leave the fray. And I think it's a real tragedy, because shop foremen tend to not necessarily be the vital role they play isn't necessarily the technical aspect of it. They tend to be a literal leadership aspect of it for many, especially as young men. I remember coming in 19, 20, 21, I have half the population have divorced parents. I'm no different. And having someone who is basically a father figure on the floor that I could go talk to, that I've trusted to be able to talk about anything with, builds a bond and a relationship over time with that person, where I became a sponge, because I could trust him. He trusted me to listen. He kicked my ass when I needed it to be. And he, for lack of a term, he gave me validation and praise when I needed it. Not more than I needed it, because, that kind of stuff hurts, especially men. But that leadership role, and you talk about, it's been almost 20 years since he's been your boss, but you're still talking to him. Somebody who you met at work, who was your leader, who was your boss, but has turned into so much more than that. And he was your foreman. Yep. And now we talk about commitment and compliance, how incredibly impactful that is. Compliance, I've never thought about that. That is truly impactful. And I hope anybody that's listening right now really takes that into account into their own day as leadership. Who in your shop is complying and who in your shop is committed to the process and committed to moving forward. That's really awesome. So now that you are in the big chair, as I call it, the big chair, what are some of your big challenges that you're facing right now that 20 years ago you never thought you'd be dealing with, and now that you are, it's a genuine challenge, because you were looking to your master techs for challenges like, how do I do that? And now that you're dealing with those challenges, what is your biggest challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, no secret to anybody in this business, is personnel, right? Is finding, you used to say, wow, finding skilled techs or high level techs is difficult. Finding any techs is difficult now, right? From lube techs all the way up through A techs or MDTs, as they're called, master diagnostics with Toyota. These guys, we've done it to ourselves as an industry. It used to be this work-life balance was violently in the sway of work and no life, right? And I was guilty of it. I would do 14, 15-hour days, 6 days a week for years. And I missed, my older kids, school things and vacations, and my health failed and all these other things. And so the workforce over the last, and I don't even know when it kind of started, maybe 10 years, maybe less, has violently taken that balance back. And those guys that are these high level, high functioning techs, they've either one grayed out and went to greener pastures, or they've just simply retired, and or they've moved to different industries, right? And then and what they've taken with them is, if they weren't put in positions of mentorship early, in their career, they haven't maybe brought up a bunch of guys underneath them in their same vein. So we have this pool of technicians that exist now that maybe didn't have that kind of leadership, that are just trying to learn it on their own via e-modules that the manufacturers put out, or 1 or 2 classes a year that they get to go sit in an instructor-led class, or YouTube or wherever, right? They're trying to just kind of figure this out. But there's a lot of stuff that shop foreman, that senior techs, that these guys used to bring to the shop, these other intangibles that aren't just nuts and bolts, like working on cars, right? How to be a professional, how to be a professional technician, how to treat your stall like it's in its own independent business, right? How you keep your workspace, how you keep your paperwork, how you interact with the service writers, customers, and parts and other techs. Like, I see messy stalls all the time, and I'll tell guys, would you, if you were a shop on the corner of this street, would you bring your car into this shop to get it worked on? Because you think of the people's car, it might be their first or second most expensive thing they own, right? And so they're not taking that lightly, right? And so I think it's just important for techs that are at, you think of a tech's career path in an arc, right? You're starting out over here, you're trying to learn everything you can, you're getting your chops busted quite a bit, you make it to the top, you've learned a lot, you've learned how to make money in the business, you're probably maxed out your status, and on the backside here, you're coasting out. You don't need to make 100 hours a week. You don't need to do all this stuff. You know how to make your hours, you're comfortable. But this last part of the arc needs to be where you're pulling these other guys up and over the hump, And if they're not put in positions to do that, then we've wasted their talent. We've wasted their abilities. We've wasted their nurturing, their mentorship, and we've ran them out. And now we're all sitting here going, oh my gosh, how do we make C techs into A techs in 6 months? You're not. You are simply not going to. And shops are doing these insane sign-on bonuses and relocation bonuses and crazy dollar per hour. And that gets passed on to someone, right? You're not paying techs these insane dollar per hour. And listen, the former gray shirt, with me, we used to wear gray Toyota tech shirts. The gray shirt in me is so happy to see these tech, flat rate hours and hourly rates and stuff like that being in the high 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. Like that, that's incredible to me. But then now you got to sit in the other office, and you're like, how do you sustain that without charging a customer $300 an hour to do these cars, while still protecting the company's gross profit percentage and things like that, right? And so it's a very difficult balance to manage, and it's not a fun part of the job. I tell you, it's probably the worst part of the job is trying to find people that want to commit to this. This isn't a job you can master in 2 or 3 years, right? This takes a 5 years minimum, 10 years to get pretty proficient, and beyond there, then now you can kind of maximize your earning potential. But you got to break it off into these 2-year chunks, right? Like whatever you're starting. If you're going to start out, you don't even have a wrench to your name, you've been flipping burgers or working at retail, you got 2 years to learn the basics, right? And then maybe you'll get an apprenticeship, and then you might have up to 2 years in an apprenticeship. And then you're going to spend the next 2 years kind of figuring out what you're good at or not good at, or kind of learning the brand. Maybe you switch brands a few times or something. So break it into these 2-year blocks, and before you know it, you are at year 5, year 8, year 10, and you're cruising along. But you can't look at it like, I might buy a house if I'm a mechanic for 10 years. Maybe I can buy a house in 20 years. You can't look at it like that. You got to narrow your focus a little bit. Be very intentional about these little blocks of time, but getting that message across to somebody who's coming from another industry or somebody who is thinking, they like working on cars, their own car, and they did it in high school auto shop if it still exists, which almost never does. How do you turn that into something you do every day for a paycheck? And it's every single day. You don't get to do it 2 days a week and then do something else a couple days a week. You are doing the same task day in and day out. It's a hard sell. It's
a really hard sell. I think, especially when there's some states that still have some low minimum wages, and there's some states who don't necessarily, or still haven't necessarily come into 2023 understanding that there is a shortage. There are leaders out there that don't care, obviously. Some of them that I've had the unfortunate nature of speaking with, and there's some high value leaders out there that I would love to get some more techs in front of, because they genuinely care, but they're in a market where there's a lot of competition for technicians, which then translates into difficulties for the leaders. Like, if you have a pool, you've got 15 dealers in a small area, if the average shop size is 20, okay, so that's 300 techs. Well, that pool isn't really much bigger than 300. And, the top 10% is the top 10%, the bottom 10% is the bottom 10%. In all likelihood, the bottom 10%, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening and you happen to be in that bottom 10%, you probably don't think you are. But there is always a bottom 10%, and those bottom 10% tend to be the ones that are going from place to place to place to place. And by the end of 15 years, they've been at all 15 dealerships in that particular small area. They pose the bad name to the trade. They pose the bad name to the dealerships, and they put the nasty taste in those leaders who's like, we want to do right by these people. We want to give them a good paycheck. We want to give them a good place to work and a good place to live and grow and be able to retire from. But it's unfortunately it tends to be those in the middle that suffer the most. That 80% in the middle who come in 15 minutes before their shift, who work for their 8 hours a day. They take their 45-minute or hour lunch. They take their breaks. They go home at 5 o'clock. The ones that punch a clock and probably roll anywhere from 95 to 105 in terms of productivity on a week, they're the ones that don't seem to get the love and attention that they need the most. And so far, based on survey data that I've collected and based on coaching, they're the ones with the most amount of neglect. Right? It's like you said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's the ones at the bottom, and the top 10%. They're not complaining that Mo and Larry are getting more hours than them because they're getting the most hours in the shop, but they want more. So they want more, and they want more, and they want more. It's the ones in the middle that aren't complaining, and those are the ones that the phrase is getting applied to. It's the quiet quitting. Well, they're not quiet quitting. They're showing up to work every day. They're working hard. And they're going home. They're not saying anything. They're not causing a fuss. They're not causing drama. They're doing their job. They're doing the training. They may not be doing all the training. They're doing the training. They're buying the tools. They're not buying all the tools. They're buying a little bit here, and they're doing a little bit here, and they're taking care of the family. But that's dwindling, because unfortunately there's lots of challenges in the trade from both sides of the coin. From leadership's perspectives, like, okay, well, we're going to hire this top tier tech to try and take over the 3 techs that we lost. Well, yes, they might be a top tier tech, and yes, they might be really great at production, but they happen to be super fucking toxic. So you might lose another 3 B players that are sitting in the middle who are happy coming in every day, and all of a sudden they're giving their notice. So it's everybody's in a challenge right now. And I think one of the key ingredients is trying to stay positive. From both leadership perspective and our perspective, turning wrenches. We need to be positive as much as we possibly can. For our own sake, for our trade's sake, for our customer's sake, for our business sake, and so on and so forth. So that leads me into the next one. What is your piece of advice for a technician out there to be happier tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to steal this right from Russell, and it's going to be that you have to mind your own bay. You have to focus on your business at hand. Run your bay like it's a business. And in order to get better at business, you need to get better at all aspects, right? I used to violently demean the service drive as a tech. I mean, there was no service writer, maybe one or two in my career that were above being just roasted on a daily basis, right? I mean, and I had really good friends that were service writers, and they were not above it. Like we were just.
I don't disagree
And
at all.
so,
As a technician, there are a handful in my career that I've worked with while writing service, and there's a handful in my career while being a tech that deserved the respect, because they were good human beings and they did their job well. But there are very few that I would say then deserved it. Now it's a completely different story.
It's when I got hurt in my career for a time, and I went on the drive, and I thought, how hard can this be, right? I mean, it just sit up there and drink coffee all day, and talk to customers. And I was probably, I think I was about 26, 27 years old when I went out there, and I was humbled within 2 weeks. I mean, I would go home in tears. I had an entire demographic of customers that just couldn't stand me, right? It was like men from 40 to 55 years old would not have anything to do with me. They thought I was just a dumb kid that didn't know anything. And that was a big chunk of our business, right? Was those guys. And I would just get murdered by those guys, right? And I could talk to the techs. Like, I was good at explaining what, they were telling to the customer. I would over tech it a lot, and early on I would diagnose on the drive, which is the number one no-no that you're not supposed to do. And I learned that the hard way. And
that is the biggest challenge to overcome as anyone who has turned a wrench for any period of time. It could be a day. The instant you come off the bench to that service drive, you have to remember that no matter how many years of experience you have, how big your toolbox is, and how many certifications that you have, that is irrelevant 99.9% of the time in the drive.
Oh, it's so hard not to do it too. It's such a knee-jerk reaction to just want to do it, But when I went back into the shop, when I wrote service for about 6 months at that time, and I went back into the shop, and I was genuinely a better tech after. I had a better understanding of the paperwork. I had a better understanding of how to sell things, basically sell it directly to the customer instead of, hoping the writer would get the nuance of what I was trying to say. I was more thorough in my write-ups, more thorough in my stories. I learned how to code my own warranty tickets out, so I knew what I was making on warranty, and not have to wait till I got my pay slip. So I learned a lot of stuff that made me a better tech. I got a better relationship with some of the writers that were up there. So, it really, really pushed me forward for the next 10 or so years when I wrenched, because I had that little bit of knowledge in my back pocket. And I thought too, hey, if this doesn't work out, if I can't wrench, if my health, something happens, I get hurt, I can always go back up there and do that. I have a good understanding of it. And that is a potential out if I need it from the line. So I earned a
big deal, I think, isn't it? That's a big deal, and I've had technicians tell me in coaching, I've had technicians tell me on LinkedIn and on TikTok, it's like, I have no career path. It's like, okay, you have a ton that you can do outside of wrenching. You can do all the skills that you learn in wrenching translate into other things. Like you said, the primary example in there is problem solving. That's the number one. The ability to identify problems and come up with solutions, and a multitude of solutions if one isn't sufficient or doesn't work. 2 is the step from the bench to the desk is not that hard for a technician, because it's still diagnosing problems. Now, you're not diagnosing what's wrong with the car, you're diagnosing what's wrong with the customer. You're diagnosing the customer. You have to understand who they are, what they represent, how they want to be treated, how they want to be spoken to, how they want to be communicated to, what things that you have leeway on, what things that you absolutely have zero leeway on. There are people who want all of the technical information, and there are people who want none of the technical information. Learning that in the drive is the nuances are harder in the drive than they are on the bench. Because on the bench, if something doesn't work, like what's the phrase? If something needs to move, and it doesn't, use a hammer or WD-40. And if it does move and it shouldn't, use duct tape or a welder.
Right.
In the service drive, you can't use those tactics. You can't. Because the nuance difference is, in the shop, if you break a bolt, you can drill it out, pull it out, put a new one in. You can't break a customer because it's really inappropriate to swing a hammer at a customer. It's not going to fix the problem.
These days, even more so, with social media. Yeah.
Right? It's not going to fix the problem. So you have to massage the situation. Maybe you said something wrong as an advisor. Maybe the sign was the wrong color blue. Right? Maybe you're at a GM store and the GM logo on the front pissed off the customer because it was the wrong shade of blue. They expected the new sign to be periwinkle blue and it's sky blue. Whatever. But in the service drive, that's what you got to deal with. And that's why I continue to say being a service manager is hard. It's very, very hard, and you have a lot of weight in your shoulders. But I still think to this day, the hardest job in the building is the service advisor, bar none. Personal opinion.
You're gonna get burned at the stake for saying that one for sure. You're gonna get some nasty comments. But I won't disagree. I won't disagree. It's a mentally. There's a lot of mental gymnastics that you have to go through. You're basically making two transactions on every service, right? One from the customer and one to the tech, right? And so your soft skills need to be much more honed than your technical skills. And I think that's where a lot of techs struggle making these transitions from the shop, from the line to the parts counter, to the front, to the service drive, to management, because their soft skills aren't ever tuned up, right? You're communicating by mostly choice 4-letter words and adjectives to the back parts counter, to other techs, hey, MF, blah, blah, blah. And that's not how you communicate on the drive. You have to be a little more polished, a little more reserved, a little more conservative in your delivery. And that transition can be tough for guys. And some people are born with it, the gift of gab, and some people love to talk, and they're natural born salesmen, whether they're working on a car or they're selling product up front. But not all techs have that, and there's no expectation that they have to. But not all service writers have these soft skills. Sometimes you can learn them. You can, there's a lot of guys that sell books on how to be a better service writer and a better tech and a better service manager, and there's good nuggets in there. But a lot of it is just
Kieran's book, Service Advisor 101, is a great entry point. And shameless plug for my buddy Kieran, because it really is a great quick book into the service drive, and it's a great way to start learning. But here's going back to soft skills here for a second. I think we need to learn as mechanics. We aren't taught any. With even my great shop foreman, even your great shop foreman, they're teaching us to be professional mechanics, but they're not teaching us to be professionals. And I think that line no one teaches us in the shop. And I think that's why it's so important. And that's why I'm trying so hard to create stuff to help teach mechanics some of those soft skills, at least to touch on it, because it does a couple things. A, you're going to piss off less service advisors. You're going to have better written stories for warranty. You're going to have better written stories for your customers. And secondly, in 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, when you go, my body hurts. Like I woke up this morning after a nice 8-hour sleep, and I tried to get out of bed, and my left knee said, no.
Yeah.
When you realize that, because we all have a point, some don't, and I know I've been scrolling the forums lately, and there's some gentlemen out there, and I haven't seen any ladies with 40 years, but there's some gentlemen with 40 years and going, I got 40 years in. Last year was the first year where I started to say, I need to be looking for an exit. Okay, well, at 40 years of the trade, this gentleman's got to be can't be younger than about 58. Okay, so at 58, that's going to be a hard thing to learn if you don't have any soft skills. So if you start learning soft skills early, start learning empathy, start learning the nuance of communication, simple things like stop using the word what and start using the word how. when you've been on the drive and as a leader, changing that one word to that other word does wonders when communicating with anyone. Mm-hmm. That one word changes a whole lot of conversations because you stop going like, I don't really want to deal with you. What is your question? To
right.
How can I serve you? How can I help you? And you become a listening person who's trying to solve a problem, who has a challenge in front of them. That nuance we need to learn and hopefully teach technicians to do. So I appreciate
my shop foreman that you said what was Rob, I think was yours, that you say what was what Rob do, but Roger was mine, and Roger would constantly tell me it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You don't say things in a way that make people want to help you. You say things in a way that make people want to run from you, and that's not how you need to be. And so I would fight over 1 or 2 tenths, on a service, and I'd go to the service writer and say, in a threatening manner, you're going to give me this 1 or 2 tenths, and I'm not going to, we're going to fight over it. Whereas, if I would have walked up and said, hey, Steve, can you just maybe help me out with this 1 or 2 tenths? I thought it was supposed to be this, and get a good thing. He'd be more than willing to just write it up as policy or something. But I would go in there, 2 guns blazing. And once I learned, and I didn't learn it then, I'm telling you, it's been years since he told me that, and I still struggle with it. I still today probably came off wrong to a number of people. And it's not something you learn overnight, and it's not something that would sit here and say that I'm great at. I've had a lot of feedback from leadership in my time, even in the place where I'm at now, and it's like, you got to work on your soft skills. I'm like, stop telling me that, but then I'll kind of come, back to center and I'll try, and I'll be great for a week, and I'll say all the right things, and I'm, and there's no confrontations, and everybody seems to, even the upset customers, I'm able to talk off the ledge, and then I'll kind of drift back, towards that line and bang off that guardrail for a while and get a little, lose my patience or get short, with somebody. And that's not an attractive thing for somebody in my position, but
it's human nature, right? You're in a position of leadership where you are literally hammered from every possible side, and you are hammered constantly. And, if you are a high value leader, if you are a good leader, and something like, I've never worked for you, so I can't answer this honestly, but you sound like you are. You sound like you're genuine. You sound like you take your losses on the chin, which means that when the team loses, you lose, which means even the smallest of loss, you're taking on your shoulders, which, every negative counter on the whiteboard goes onto your shoulders, and you're carrying it. When that weight gets too heavy and you haven't offloaded, and that's the value of you having a mentor. That's why you call Roger, right? That's when you call Roger, because you need someone to help you carry the weight. Yeah. Right. And I think that's where that comes full circle. And just to kind of close off that statement, you reiterated the 2 words. It's not what you say, it's how you say. Because so the words and the phrase that we've been using since we were that our mothers have been telling us for decades, it's literally in the phrase. It's not what, it's how. So that should be today's little mental. That's awesome, and I appreciate that. So, Mike, I appreciate your time. Like I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Josh, for allowing me this forum and allowing me to come on here. You've had a lot of great voices on here, and I've listened to all the podcasts, and I've shouted back at some of the podcasts, and I'm sure somebody will be shouting back at me in this one too. But and I'm glad it's not live when you do them sometimes, because I want to call in and be like, "What are you talking?" And so, but I think it's healthy. It's healthy for people from the very earliest stages of their career through guys where I'm at to in the middle of their Marshall Sheldon, incredibly smart. I love listening to that guy's posts. Like, I want to work on heavy equipment just so I can sometime run through him, right? I like that. The way, and he doesn't, and the way he posts is I read it. I don't have any connection to heavy duty diesel or anything or fleet or field service like he does, but I connect with it. Like he speaks in a way that is just really engaging. Same with Russ, right? When Russell posts, I'm like, I don't know where it's going to be, so I'm like, what headspace is he in? And he always kind of brings it back around, and it's something. There used to be a guy that he hasn't posted on there in a while, Dan Beakey. Dan Beakey used to post and just have some really cool things to say, and it was like he was very open, he was very honest. He dressed it down. He didn't try to say, he didn't use all the, hey, we're killing it and we're crushing it, and he didn't use all that stuff. He was very candid, like, sometimes this sucks, and we're all kind of going through it together. So I like hearing that. I'm hoping that somebody might hear what we've talked about today, and maybe that does something. Maybe they completely disagree and call me an a-hole. It's fine. I've been called worse. But,
I think if any reaction is fine. I think at the end of the day, as long as we help someone somewhere be better in some way tomorrow and every day after, that is ultimately the goal. The goal of the Wrenchers podcast was to help technicians be happier, healthier, and more productive. At the end of the day, that's the goal. So how we come about that, whether it's through stories, whether it's through experiences or tips or random quotes from childhood or whatever the case may be, like that big one today for me was is it compliance or is it commitment? That's going to stick. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the time and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Josh.